The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of its participants and do not reflect the views and opinions of any employer, MSP, sponsor, advertiser, or vendor. If you're struggling with the complexity of Microsoft 365 deployment, management, and automation, it's time to check out CoreView. Created by MSPs for MSPs like you, they help you with the end-to-end Microsoft 365 administration from the moment you set up a new tenant. Packed with things like unified visibility and control of all your tenants from a single UI, to powerful no-code automation engine, baseline tenant configurations, drift remediation, and much more, you can supercharge your productivity and do even the most time-consuming tasks with just one click. Work effortlessly and deliver best practices to your customers today with CoreView. To learn more, visit atmsp.link/CoreView.
Here's a bit on how not to do marketing, by the way. There's somebody, I'm not going to say who, but he's in our industry who loves to do LinkedIn marketing. And he thinks that's the way to get new clients and stuff like that. And you pay him a lot of money and nothing pans out. Just putting it out there. Anyway, I don't think this is from him, but I do get solicited on LinkedIn a lot, especially from people who want to help promote the podcast. And I put that in quotes if you're not watching on YouTube. I help you get podcasts to 1 million view. Like, it's not even English. Like, it's not like you read it.
Yeah.
You're just like, anyway, so I got this one message the other day, and it says, "Hey, Justin, just wanted to see if you were up to partnering on something. I can bring you 10 qualified companies that need your business consulting services this month if you're interested. We're looking to partner on a long-term win-win revenue share basis. You open to chat." Sounds great. Here's the kick. The subject comes in as partner up, bracket, first name, bracket, first name. Like, thanks, bot. That's the thing, right? Like, if you're going to do LinkedIn messaging, which is a legit tactic,
Yep.
don't screw it up.
Well, and there's even more to it than that, right? So I am listening to Gary Vaynerchuk's new book.
Yeah, how's that?
Day Trading Attention. And of course, I mean, Gary, always interesting, always, some really good insights.
Yeah.
And, he talks about it, and so many marketers, and, I've used it too, use the automation tools to just blast the same post across different things. And the different platforms behave differently. The algorithms are different. The people are different. The audiences react different. They react different on the platform that they're reacting on, because people, they're doing one thing while they're on Facebook, they're doing another while they're on TikTok, and they're doing another while they're on LinkedIn. So it really, it clicked with me and makes sense, but that is a lot of work.
The funny thing is he's been toting that same thing since his first book, Crush It. And even with that, I still invented an app called Homebase where you can put like a tweet in a box and you can blast it to all your services. I built like a social media blasting service back in the day for the iPhone, even though I knew that it was like a bad idea. But yeah, you're right. Like the reaction and how you do things, because a lot of people use Facebook for more personal things compared to LinkedIn, which is supposed to be for more business things, which, it's a little blurry. And then people use TikTok for all the weird, kinky sex things. Or dad jokes, whatever TikTok you're on. Last
those things go together.
Yeah. Well, last week we talked about how I was on Costco Food Talk. So this week I'm on, don't judge me, I'm on Power Ranger TikTok. I found a live feed of like the Japanese show on YouTube, and now I'm going down that rabbit hole, but whatever. The point being that, yes, they react differently. And so if you're going to be in a professional setting like LinkedIn, you need to not have common misplaced mistakes like bracket first name and try to use these automated platforms. So there is stuff that can be done there, but like I said, just don't screw it up.
Yeah. Well, people are going to continue to try and cheat the system. So I'm wondering, like, how long is it going to be before somebody creates one of these tools that takes your post and then adopts it for the different platforms to make it more searchable?
It's not available. We did this 4 podcasts ago, but all things AI. Near.
Level up your domain security and email deliverability. Achieve peace of mind, reduce ransomware, reduce business email compromise, reduce email phishing and other attacks. Make DMARC a new revenue stream for your MSP. Becoming a managed service provider partner with EasyDMARC is an excellent opportunity for your business to boost sales and increase revenue. Your customers need DMARC, although they might not realize it yet. Your job is to let them know that their email infrastructure might be at risk of email spoofing and phishing attacks, and that you can offer them a simple solution: email authentication. Become the DMARC expert your clients need with EasyDMARC. Find out more today at atmsp.link/EasyDMARC.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the All Things MSP podcast. I'm your host, Justin Escar. With me always is my good friend, podcast producer extraordinaire, man in the blue and the green shirt, Mr. Eric Anthony. What's up, buddy?
Feeling blue today.
You're
only going to get that if you're watching the video, by the way. Which, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, we are like 31 subscribers away from 2,000. And so it would really make my day if people could go and subscribe.
If you go subscribe, because it tells you which subscriber number you are, there's a way to tell. If you are the 2,000th subscriber, grab a video screenshot of you subscribing, becoming number 2,000, send it to Eric and I, and I'll send you a little something. Yeah, join us, youtube.com/@allthingsmsp for that. Want to jump right into things today. It's been a hell of a week. Last time you and I spoke, the CrowdStrike thing was going on, and then the memes started. The weekend of fun, the weekend of poking the bear. CrowdStrike obviously bounced back, but so many companies did not. And I think the winner of the entire CrowdStrike thing, as much as it pains me to say it, is Southwest Airlines. Right?
Yeah, one of my favorites, actually. We're flying Southwest on Monday to go to ChannelCon. And kind of glad at this point that they're still using Windows 3.1.
They did, however, as of today, they got rid of their open seat policy. So now there was an article in the New Yorker this morning, all airlines are the same, because they're losing it. But I was like, this is clickbait. But yeah, the fact that they're still using Windows 3.1 and they were able to. This goes back to what I was talking about, the self-checkout machines at supermarkets and such.
Right.
Run some version of Windows XP. I don't understand. I think it's hilarious that Southwest was not affected by the CrowdStrike thing because they used old technology. But it also scares the absolutely ever-living shit out of me that they're still using this and they haven't been hacked. And also, let's just take into account that they've now told the world that they use Windows 3.1. There's definitely someone who's like, I'm going to go after them.
Yeah. And, somebody was kind of classic in the group. They did post, the article about how Windows 3.1 was saving Southwest's butt during this thing. And I loved their comment. They said, I kind of assumed they were on AS400s, which, kind of not wrong, right?
I know, as a Mac person, I know nothing about these machines. I do know that I went to a Toloris event 2 years ago, and one of the big things they were pitching was cloud infrastructure. And they were like, if any of your clients ever say the words AS400, just tell them you have something for them, put them on the phone with us. We'll take it from there. And I was, Southwest, I'm going to call Southwest. I'm going to get Toloris to take care of Southwest. No, they're on Windows 3.1. I remember Windows 3. It was a ugly green background, and it was the invention of solitaire with these square boxes. Is it really that the old technology, because they didn't implement the new stuff to protect them, right? So that makes sense. But they're not immune to problems. So who's supporting this? it's not obviously they have internal IT. I know it's not an MSP, but like we put in our contracts that like we don't support operating systems that are 2 years older than what's current. Windows 3.1 was what, like 84, 85? I'm going to look this up while you
My guess would be that Microsoft gave them a number and they wrote a check.
Windows 3.1 came out in 1992. I'm just putting that out there,
Yeah.
right? So it's 32 years old.
Because Microsoft doesn't make all their money on your Office 365 subscription.
No, they do it on Azure or Entra or Login ID or whatever they're calling it.
All of those other things.
All of those names. It's how the marketing department keeps themselves employed. Just coming. We need to change the name of Azure. We need to come up with a new name for the logo. The argument of security through obscurity, I think, is what wins here, right? Because
possibly,
let's be honest, if it's an airline, their stuff must be gatewayed and firewalled to all living hell. So it really doesn't matter what's on the inside as long as they're fully controlling like what's in the bubble, I would assume. And I'm making gross assumptions here, right? Like if you have, you know what I'm thinking? Like this came to my mind, top head. And this is why I am horrible at this show, is that thinking about a Windows 3.1 machine from Southwest or their entire office in this bubble, the first thing that came to my mind, true story, is the mosquito that's been cooked in amber for Jurassic Park. Like, it's preserved. It's preserved, right?
So,
I don't know how this works.
But, I want to go back to your statement, though, because I really do think that what's inside really does matter. And the other statement you made was, about gross assumptions. And you know what? We have a guest today.
I see what you did there. So we have a guest. I love it when we have a guest. I always say that. Yes, I do always say that. Bring him up. Mr. Brad Gross from the law offices of Brad Gross. Very famous. How are you,
guys?
Sir?
Doing well today.
Awesome.
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here, man. I know you a long time. Eric knows you a long time. But for those who are listening and don't know you, give everybody like a quick 2-minute spiel who you are and what's with that old-timey computer back there, Boomer?
If you're going to insult my computer, I'm hanging up. I'm getting out of here. Okay, that's what I'm going to say. Let's set some ground rules.
Sure.
So, who am I? I'm an attorney that has been representing service providers for 23 years. We've counseled more service providers than all law firms combined, thousands and thousands of them. And it's sort of, this is what we do, right? The topics that you're talking about, CrowdStrike and all that stuff, this is where we get involved. So I'm happy to be on today. We're going to talk about anything and everything MSP. Let's do it. I have my own podcast, by the way, that I know you're familiar with at technologybradcast.com. So you're going to make fun of my computer. I'm going to have you on my podcast. I'm going to make fun of your little Apple thing that's in the background there.
That's
somewhere.
a pillow over there. That's a pillow.
Oh, well,
all right.
Wait, hold on.
Hold
on. I have to put my glasses on. Oh, you're right. It's a pillow. Never mind. All right.
All right. So for full transparency for everyone in the group, Brad does represent virtual computers. I do like to get that out there because I don't want anyone to think that like there's some secrets here or anything like that. So that being said, let's get into it. There's a lot of talk about contracts all over the place. Apple, PCMSP does not matter. Should I have a contract? Should it be a year? Should it be a month? Let's start from the beginning. Most people probably have contracts, yes?
Mm-hmm. Well, most, I would say that it's better than it used to be. A couple of years ago, I would say that most MSPs did not have contracts or they didn't use adequate contracts, right? They were using purchase orders or invoices and thinking, oh, I'm protected, right? But that's how I put my kids through college. So that's not how it is any longer. So MSPs are now starting to use contracts. Now we're starting to question the value of those contracts because they're not always written so well. But they do, they do try to move the ball down the field.
Right.
Yeah. And now we have AI trying to write contracts, and that's probably adding another layer of mess to this whole thing.
Yeah. It's funny because in AI writing contracts, right? So I wrote a book right? And in that book, I actually have a chapter in which it is entitled, I hope, or I want you. I think it says, I want you to use ChatGPT to write your next contract because I have kids in college and I need the money. That's actually the name of the chapter. So, AI is an interesting technology that gives you good ideas, right? It gives you a great place to start, but it's not ready to start writing out full-length contracts and addressing the realities of the MSP industry.
Yeah.
Not even close.
And if you go back to an episode where we had Adam Ang's on, Adam very definitively puts it out there as ChatGPT is a C+ student, which for me,
Right.
which just sucks for me because I was a D student, so ChatGPT wins. But Brad, you're an official
Slightly
lawyer.
above where you
You
were.
went to law school.
Yeah.
You have the Esquire at the end of your name. You don't just fake it like some people in was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And so it's a good thing. All right, so let's talk about the contracts themselves, right? So obviously people understand I need to have a contract. I need to protect myself. But why? What's happening there? What's inside this contract that MSPs really should be thinking about to forward their business? Because from my perspective, the contract just isn't only about protecting, but it's also about value of your business.
Right. So, and that's actually where a lot of MSPs go off the rails from a contract perspective. A contract historically has always been thought of as a document that protects you from the legal things, right? The so-called legal. Legal, that's a fancy way of saying if we screw up, are we protected? That's legal. That's what we have a contract for. But in this industry, as in many, but this specific industry, the MSP industry, legal is not as relevant on a day-to-day basis. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you don't live in a world of legal. You don't live in a world where you're constantly writing checks and constantly being sued. And then you say, well, how much is my liability here? It's important to have it, but that's not where you live. Where you live, or MSPs live, is in a world of reality, right? Reality-based contracting is how I want people to start thinking about their contracts. Yes, it's important to talk about legal, but how about the realities that pop up on a day-to-day basis? Okay, day-to-day basis. You're not in court. You're not being sued. You're not writing a check, but you have an issue, right? An issue. Your client doesn't listen to you. And then the thing that you said was going to happen happens. And they blame you. We're not in court, right? We're not being sued, but now we're going to spend money on attorneys to figure out who's right. The MSP that didn't do something because they recommended it and they were rejected, or the customer who says, well, I didn't know what the heck I was rejecting. Yeah. Right? I didn't know. You're asking me, the customer, if I want this solution? Does a surgeon ask the patient, should I cut in over here or over here? Right? The surgeon does it. Now what? Now we're talking, right? This is reality. And this is the type of reality that contracts have to talk about. And there are dozens of these realities. And it is sort of my mantra to tell everybody that, yeah, legal's important and limitation of liability. I get it. But where you really want to think about, what you really want to focus in on is the reality that you face. And that's what keeps you up at night. And that's what you need to address.
All right. So going on that, though, the reality of the world that we live in from a technology standpoint nowadays is there's so much stuff in the cloud. So yeah, the post that we're talking about here, Mike Murphy posts on the All Things MSP Facebook group, which if you're not in, facebook.com/group/All Things MSP, the CrowdStrike issue, right? And it was, how do you talk to your clients? Now, the CrowdStrike thing, luckily for us as Apple consultants, did not affect many of our clients. I had one client who was being affected by it because a bank was affected by it and was crashing their Mac. Mm-hmm. CrowdStrike is not owned by an MSP. It is not owned by us. It is not owned by the MSPs. And yet there's problems with it. Clients can't access Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So that is an upstream provider problem. With everything being in the cloud, going back to what we're talking about reality, where is my reality if everything's in the cloud? The client's still going to come after me. So how am I using a contract and using your stuff to protect me from CrowdStrike's inadequacies for quality assurance?
Sure. Well, in your example, your customer's going to come after you because you didn't address the reality that most things that you provide, that you offer, I should say, as an MSP, you don't actually provide. You facilitate them, you resell them, You monitor them, but you don't actually provide them. And that distinction is what separates the MSP that says, well, my customer's going to blame me, and now what am I going to do? From the MSP that says, I already explained that these are upstream third-party providers, and that while we will try to facilitate a workaround, if one's available, we are not going to take liability or responsibility for things that happen upstream, that we don't govern, that we don't manage, that we don't control. But MSPs don't do that. Not often enough. They don't explain how the relationship that they have with upstream vendors. And so as a result, what you now have is CrowdStrike saying, oh, well, listen, this is what we're going to do in the future. We're going to do a staggered deployment. We're going to do updates gradually and put them in, I think they said, a canary environment. Well, that's all well and good. Right? But as an MSP, now you, the MSP, you have to explain all this to your customer. That is not the time. That is not the time to first tell your customer, I think I should explain exactly what it is that we do and that we facilitate things. That's not the time. Yeah. And that's the issue that MSPs face.
So
that's the reality.
I just kind of had a revelation here where, the legal side of it is the worst case scenario, right? But when you're talking about reality based,
depends on your perspective.
But
I don't know if it's worst case.
It's not worst case for you, but it's worst case for everyone else.
It's a tough situation. Let's say
tough
that
situation,
where tough situation
where relationship fails to solve the problem. But in creating a good contract, you're actually reducing the friction in the relationship. That's the point that I really wanted to make, is that it does 100%. More on the day-to-day than it really does in that. Okay, I don't have another word for worst case scenario, for the end of the road.
Right. No, you're right. Reducing the friction, and you reduce the friction and you lower the tension by managing customer expectation. Right. And you manage expectation by explaining realities to them at the outset. Because, and I tell this to MSPs all the time, MSP customers don't exactly understand what MSPs do.
Right.
Right. They say, oh, we have a guy, right? I got a guy. They mean an MSP, right? I have a guy who does my backup. I have a guy who does my security. But if you said, well, that backup that they're doing, if you needed to get your stuff back, how long would it take? I don't know. Let me ask you, that backup that they're doing for you, is the data encrypted at rest while it's on your computer and in transit? I don't know. Right? You could ask all kinds of questions. That data, is it also co-located somewhere else? So should one source fail, another will kick in. I don't know. All they know is I got a guy who does backup. So it's important for MSPs to explain the reality of the service. Right? It's important for them to explain the value and the scope of the service so that should something go wrong in the future, it's understood how it's going to be handled, who's going to take responsibility for it, and how things will progress from there.
So how do you propose that MSPs do this? Because I'm sure a lot of MSPs don't want to show what's behind the curtain, right? As an Apple provider, there's 4 major MDM providers that are out there. You got Jamf, Adigy, Conji, Mosel, right? Mm-hmm. If we're an Adigy shop and Adigy has problems, I can't go to my clients and go, well, Adigy has problems. They're not going to understand who Adigy is. And I don't want to go behind the curtain because I don't want them getting their own Adigy licenses and cutting me out or doing something or whatever. I'm making up a scenario.
Yeah.
So where's that balance between, let's say, truth telling, what's behind the curtain, and marketing rhetoric?
Well, I think that, you could explain any of your services in a vendor agnostic way. Okay, you don't have to mention Adigy. You don't have to mention any vendor. Nonetheless, you could explain what a service does, what it doesn't do, what its limitations are, should certain things happen, how those things will be remediated, and never mention a vendor, right? The example I like to give is, let's take awareness training, okay? Pick any awareness training program you want, any solution you want. Doesn't matter. We're not endorsing them here by mentioning them, but just pick one. And if I said to you, starting next week, you can't use it anymore. Can't use it. You have to switch. So what are you going to do? So you're going to go online. You're going to look for a similarly situated company that offers a similar service, and you're going to go for it, right? You're going to find a service that offers 24/7 online, on-demand videos in multiple languages that teach employees the latest malware, so on and so forth, through phishing campaigns, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that is KnowBe4. That's Breach Secure Now. That's Bullfish. That's Infama. That's Proofpoint, right? CyberGuard 360. They all do that. But by explaining it in a vendor agnostic way, because when I explained it, I didn't mention the vendor. I just said, this is what it does. This is how we're going to, how it will be delivered. You could even explain the limitations of it, right? Just because you have a security awareness solution does not make you invulnerable to malware. It is not a solution in and of itself. It must be combined with other security-related solutions to provide a true safety net for you. You could explain all that. And which vendor are we using? I don't know. It doesn't really matter, does it? But this is how you manage expectations. You tell it, because they might say, how did I get phished? I have security awareness training. We went through the training. We got phished anyway. It's your fault, Eric. Well, unless you explain that awareness training, what it does, but what it doesn't do, what its limitations are, unless you explain that, yeah, you're going to have a phone call from a customer saying, how come I got phished? This is why you gave me a solution. It's your fault.
I do like that. I do like that it was Eric's fault, not my fault. That makes me feel better about myself, knowing that my security awareness training is better.
Always Eric's.
We're going to screw you later on. Don't worry. Soon. It's coming.
So you make this service guide for clients. It's when we interact with you.
That's right.
Right? We have our service agreement, and you created a service guide for us. And in that service guide was the list of all these things, very agnostic to all of these particular items. How does then, I now have a contract that you've written that's online because it's immutable, which we can get into later, and the service guide. How do I then get a client to sign off on these things? Am I giving them a quote, and it says, of our service guide, which may have 150 items, you're only getting 4 of them, you're getting all 150. How do I change my thinking as the MSP from a written contract where they would sign something off to this new modality with a service guide and an online contract?
Sure. So a service guide, like you're talking about, is a document, a guide that explains everything that you do. Okay, every service that you provide. But the actual services that are being purchased, that's what they get. And that has to be explained to them. The same way that if we were to go to like Amazon.com to buy a pair of glasses, okay, we go to Amazon, what's the homepage show me? It shows me everything from markers to staplers, right? To everything, to kitchen knives. It shows me everything they sell. But I'm only there for glasses. And when I make a purchase of glasses, I get an invoice, right? Click here to, click now to buy or whatever it is. Same thing that MSP should be doing. You can have a service guide explain everything that you're doing, all your services and so forth, but it's the quote that's going to tell them what they're going to get. And it is the quote that is going to direct them to look in the service guide to see what it is that they're buying. Now, the advantage of having a guide is that if you're listing everything that you provide, all the services that you provide or facilitate, your customer might actually read it. And while they're reading it, they might realize, oh, hey, they offer a whole bunch of things. Same analogy to Amazon, right? You got Amazon buy glasses, you're like, oh, I think I do need a battery backup from my, whatever it is. Or, oh, gee, I think I do need a car reflector windshield thing. It's an upsell. Yeah. It can act as an upsell, right? Because you're telling them not only are they getting this, but if they want it, they could get a whole bunch of other things. So it serves two purposes. One, it manages expectations by explaining what the thing does and what it doesn't do. And it also provides a marketing opportunity to show customers that you are actually far more varied, far more diversified than just a backup solution or an awareness training program.
Right. You put together this whole service guide that's online. All right, so I'm going to jump back to contracts because now I think we've figured out how to show behind the curtain, but not really for the clients, right? That's a good thing. So let's get to the contract now. Client MSPs want contracts, need contracts. We've already discussed that.
Yeah.
What's the number one mistake MSPs are doing with their contracts right now that are not with you already?
Besides not having me write
Right,
them.
exactly. Yeah.
Other than that,
yeah.
Other than that obvious and flaw in their strategy. I would say that, I mean, look, content-wise, MSPs are not addressing realities. Okay, but we talked about that, how they have to address realities. Otherwise, all you have is an agreement that says, if we screw up and we're sued, this is how much we're writing a check for. That's all your agreement says, unless you put reality in it. Put that aside for a moment. The next biggest screw up is MSPs not using their agreements. Really, they have agreements and then they don't use them. It's shocking to me how many times I'll talk to an MSP and I'll say, do you send out a quote for everything you do? No. Why not? Well, it was just a printer install. Or, we were just doing a diagnostic audit, so we didn't do it. As if bad things can't happen in a printer install or a diagnostic audit.
Yep.
So that's the problem. The problem is sometimes, I'll say bad things happen to good contracts because they're not used. If I ask you to come into my office to run a diagnostic audit, and I don't know, you load up whatever you load up just to run the audit, and it triggers a cryptovirus. Who am I blaming? Blaming you. Now you could say, Brad, we didn't do anything wrong. All we did was load this up and it would have been triggered eventually. And you might be right. But from my perspective, things were working before you got here. They're not working now. Fix it, or you're responsible. Now what? Now lawyers will argue at an hourly rate, very slowly, so slowly, about who's right and whose responsibility it is. If you had an MSA in place, it's a different story. So I would say that the number one mistake after the content of the MSA itself is just the idea of an MSA not using the contract it has for everything it does.
Right. And one of the things you taught me when we did ours was every quote, every invoice that goes out has a little paragraph at the bottom of it that says, like, this quote or invoice is governed by our MSA, and with a link to it on our website, which is hidden from crawlers, and follows the service guide with a link to the service guide. I forget our exact language, but it says something to that effect where it says, like, this transaction that happens between you, customer, and me, the MSP, is covered under this contract and under this. And if you have a problem with it, tough noogies.
Well, I don't know about tough noogies, but the idea is that if you're going to start doing the paradigm that I always encourage, which is posting things and referencing them, it has to be done in a clear, unambiguous manner with the obvious intent of the parties to be bound in that way. Fancy way of saying, if you're going to have an agreement that they're agreeing to, and that agreement isn't in front of them, but it's in a different location, you need to make sure that your customers know clearly, unambiguously, before they accept that quote, that statement of work, right, that there's another document that governs. And here it is. It's over here. And by accepting this, right, by accepting the quote, you accept that document. And that can be done, depending on aesthetics of your quote. It could be done right up front. It could be done right above the signature block. But I always suggest putting that type of, warning, for lack of a better way of putting it, those sentences. Yeah. I always suggest putting them in a place where a reasonable person will always see them. So it might be at the very beginning, because, I don't know, when you start reading a quote, you don't start from the middle and read down, you start from the top, right? So if it's there, a reasonable person would see it. If it's immediately above the signature block in clear and unambiguous font and typeface, they had to sign it, right? How do you sign? What are you looking here, but not here? That doesn't make sense. So that's the way you do it.
So it be like, I'm thinking about how our PSA tool writes these quotes, and now you got me thinking, because we just moved stuff into a new tool. I'm pretty sure that our terms of service fall on a second page, but the quote is on page one. Now, granted, it is all digital, and there's a digital signature of it, But according to your example, that would not be a good place to have it because it's technically on page 2, and God forbid someone ever turns a page.
Well, look, ideally you don't want it in that format, but let's say your PSA sort of requires it, or it's too difficult to change it in any other way. Then what you're going to do, okay, is again, before the signature block or right on top of it, you make it very clear. There are additional terms. They're on the next page, right? They're on page 2. They're binding, they're here and so forth. By signing below, you accept this and that. It's all about clarity. So, while I understand different PSAs do things differently, as long as you can sit back, and if we talked about it and I said, pick someone who's not in the industry. Pick your friend who's, I don't know, a waiter, right? Okay, he reads this contract. Would he know that the terms were on the second page? Right? Would he know, or might he be fooled into signing without? If the answer is yeah, he would know, then you probably did it right. The whole historical process by which we've drafted contracts, where you have the contract and a signature block below and so on. That's because back when this stuff started, all they had was a papyrus paper, right? And a little quill pen. And this is the way it was done. But, with technology, contracts don't have to be on the same page as the acceptance, right? They could be referenced. They could be online. They could be everywhere. As long as the parties understand what they're getting into clearly before they accept, you have an enforceable agreement.
All I'm thinking about is my friend, the waiter, because at my age, if my friend is a waiter, they're definitely not looking at page 2 because they're still a waiter.
If he's a waiter, he's probably not signing too many contracts either because he's just living life,
Yeah.
So
collecting tips and probably smoking weed. I don't know. I don't know what waiters do anymore.
By the way, can we have a podcast on how we can all get that job? Because that would be a nice life.
I don't know what waiters do anymore. Yeah. Well, Brad, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you online? Because you're going to get bombarded with phone calls from ATMSP members who are looking to work on their contracts.
Sure. So if they want to email me, brad@bradleygross.com. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Bradley Gross. Message me, connect with me. That's fine. Go to the podcast, technologybradcast.com. But get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, MSPs, you do need contracts. You should have them done. You should have them done by Brad. They are very well done. And also, Brad's team is very thoughtful and methodical, and they really do get stuff. Actually, real quick anecdote.
You know what? Don't say that too loud because then they're going to ask for more money. Well, so just stop. Just stop.
Quick anecdote. I was on vacation in the Bahamas, and Shauna from your team called me because I had called her like a couple days earlier, and I didn't have cell service. I don't know how my phone rang. It was the only phone call I got my entire vacation, and it was Shauna calling me back. And my wife made the connection to, if you remember from Tropic Thunder, where the agent brings the TiVo to Ben in the forest, and he's like, "I got the TiVo
in the jungle."
Yeah, my wife thinks that Sean is finding a way to get in touch with me, no matter where I am, to make sure that
we'll track you down. We'll track you down, brother.
Mm-hmm. Well, do check out Brad's stuff.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, man. Mm-hmm. Check out Brad's stuff. Get a contract done. Eric, any final words before we say goodbye to the good folks at home?
I think my favorite comment from today was bad things can happen to good contracts. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's going to go in a social media post accompanying the link to this podcast.
I love it.
And I will say that we've had Brad on the call now for about 36 minutes. So he's charged us 6 times because you do every 6 minutes with lawyers.
Oh, you have no idea the bill you're going to get.
Yeah, so we're going to hang out now. Ladies and gentlemen, check us out, facebook.com/group/allthingsmsp. Follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/@allthingsmsp. Follow us on your favorite podcasting tools. Leave a review for us. Leave a review for Brad. Whatever works. We're fine with that. That's Eric. I'm Justin. Bye.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching All Things MSP Live. You can reach me, Eric Anthony, at eric@allthingsmsp.com. If you're a guest, if you're a vendor, if you want to sponsor the show, let me know.